The importance or the relevance of sociologists in a seminar which is to be flooded with economists. With that in mind, when we really started doing research on development, which because I work as a professor of development studies for the last decade, and my then student, now development professional Deepika Mishra, was working on a project which was known as Satya Jivika Uparjan Yojana. Now, interestingly, this project, when Deepika sees the title, she says, "Sir, इसमें labor market कहाँ है?" So I say labor market वहाँ है जहाँ खत्म हो जाता है इनका labor market. So it's basically that you have a concept of the underclass about people who are neither employable nor workable. And that is the beauty of the project, that we're talking about a certain category of underclass in the Marxian sense of people who are working but not by the standard parameters of the labor market. Our project is ethnographic in nature or qualitative in nature, which has a poverty of methodology, as the economists would have, but it has a sophistication of narratives. But before getting into that part, I would like to get into a theoretical project where the project is about looking at how development furthers outcomes and not necessarily outputs. And having said that, as my previous presenter has just iterated Nancy Fraser, we take the lead from there as well, and we argue that when you talk about social justice, it is a question of trying to balance out dilemmas of recognition and redistribution. And the problem with our subjects has been that economists by far would look into more into the question of the latter, and sociologists and anthropologists look into the former. And this is exactly what kind of a bipartite division between the focus of social justice that Nancy Fraser asks us to move beyond. She tries to argue that even if there is a certain kind of any project, there are cases where you might have the best of planned programs, but there are cultural modes within which you need to dig into to see how those projects are acclimatized. And that's why the distinction between what I call as the economism, which presumes that the moment we, rectify or, screw it up a bit, the maldistribution, things will go all fine. And the anthropologists believe that, well, everything is in the cultural order, and we need to understand the cultural sanctity of projects. Having said that, the ultra-pro graduation approach is an approach which has started at BRAC, not very novel to Bihar, but of course novel in the sense of the Indian context, because they have taken it up. But this is a very interesting project which says that we would like to look into the upliftment of women who belong to one of the four categories: SC/ST, female-headed households, and those households of toddy tappers who have lost their livelihoods due to the liquor ban, and households having a monthly income of less than INR 300. Now, this is an interesting example where I think it's a good vision and foresight of the government of Bihar that they look into the prisms of economism and culturalism at one and the same time, and the way in which they are enmeshed. With such kind of a novel project, we find that they started doing a targeting, the targeted development programs, and they found out that around 70,000 ultra-poor households in the state of Bihar, and they started with a pilot study, and one of the studies was started in Madhubani. So when we did our study, we did it in two phases. We looked into one of the earliest programs that started. However, so all the empirical details will be given by my colleague later on, but last, to give a note here, even if the study is sociologically thrusted upon, however, we give due respect to our economics colleagues, and like Tatse and ZV, who have studied in the Ethiopian context and do a lot of regression analysis and modeling in world development, and they come up and tell us two important things. One, you do give grants, which is better than credits, provided you can control the wealth and household characteristics. Number two, grants are better if they are investments in a planned manner. So then we thought, what do we have to contribute? Ape it up in the Indian context? No, we said, let's go to something different. Let's go and start and find out and trace what happens into the lives of these people when this model comes to their houses. So, and a bit more of tangible research, and something where we go and learn from the horse's mouth what happens to them when they are made a part and parcel of the graduation approach. For the rest of the proceedings, I now invite my colleague Deepika to carry on.
Thank you, sir, for briefing the theoretical part of the project. And moving forward, I would like to discuss about the empirical context of the project. So, the Satya Jivika Uparjan Yojana, or Sustainable Livelihood Scheme, is a differential and intensive strategy for developing sustainable livelihood among the ultra-poor households. It mainly comprises four components. The first is capacity building, another is livelihood financing, convergence, and project management. And in the picture, we can see the four phases support of the project. Firstly, they select beneficiaries and provide grants in different phases, and also they provide hand-hold support to the household for bringing them into the mainstream of the society. Now, moving forward, this is about the methodology of the study, which aims to examine the role of economic and cultural imperatives in impacting the outcomes of grant-based livelihood assistance scheme (SJY) for ultra-poor women. The study was conducted in the Benipatti block of Madhubani district, and the sample size of the study was 50, which has been selected on the mentioned basis. This is the site of the study. Benipatti block and Madhubani district is highlighted in the map. And so, now moving to the findings. The first finding of the study highlights that there is this asymmetry between beneficiaries' capability and livelihood options. And as we can see in this pie chart, only for eight out of the 40 households started their livelihood by their choice, or we can say their capabilities. It means that we have selected 40 beneficiaries for our study, and among them only 8 of them received their livelihood by their choice because ultra-poor women are morely illiterate. They didn't want the micro-enterprises because they were not comfortable with the basic calculation, but as per the demand of the market, they have been provided with the support of micro-enterprises. And also this finding is related with our third finding, which I will discuss later. And the second finding of the study highlights that there is a critical link between enterprise cycle and funding pattern. And as we can see in the figure, the funding pattern of the project has been mentioned. The first SIF, that is the Special Investment Fund, which is provided for developing or establishing the enterprises, has been received by below than 50% of the 2018 beneficiary, which is because the SIF investment or fund has come into the policy in 2019 itself. It is because the recommendation the Jivika has received later on. And when we see about the Livelihood Investment Fund and the Livelihood Gap Assistance Fund, it is quite similar in both the years. Now, the third finding is it highlights, as we can see in the map, in Madhubani district, SC/ST and Todi Topos coverage is below than 50%. And as mentioned earlier by Professor Aditya, the main focus of the project was to provide livelihood to these people because they have lost their major source of livelihood after the liquor ban. But when we see, the data of the field shows that still there's a lack. They are not being covered fully, and hence there is a need to explore more innovative livelihood opportunities to accommodate more ultra-poor women, especially the SC/ST and handicappers, because as mentioned by the mentioned groups, they were not comfortable with the livelihood choices the SJY scheme offers to them, and also their earning was far better in this toddy production in comparison with the enterprises and livestock management that they get in SJY project. Now this finding highlights. This is the last finding of the study, which emphasize on acknowledging the role played by MRPs or the frontline workers in improving institutional outcomes. This has been defined through a case of Sunita Jha, who is 36-year-old woman, and whose life has gone to blight because of her husband's death. She was selected in SJY in 2018, and through the grant received, she opened a cosmetic store. But unfortunately, her business went into loss because of a natural disaster. And later, she herself managed her business, and for overcoming to the loss, she took help from the neighbors or relatives. But it should be noted that the policy ensured 24 months handhold support to the beneficiaries. Hence, ethically, she should be provided some funds for overcoming from her situation. While cross-checking with the policy actors, I got to know that there was the MRPs or the frontline workers were overburdened with the works because the policy says that per MRP will be responsible for 35 households, but in this case she was responsible for the 60 household, and she was covering 2 panchayats. Hence, it was impossible for also for her to regularly visit all the households. For the next, now I would like to request Professor Aditya to conclude this session.
Thank you, Deepika, for, I think, helping me fit in at the right time. So within a couple of minutes, I'll be wrapping up our presentation. Well, to sum up, if you remind the 4 most important findings, out of 5 I think the third, second, and the fourth one was a bit repetitive. But one is that there is an asymmetry between beneficiaries' capacities and the livelihood option that they're offered. 2, there are critical links between the enterprise cycle and the funding pattern. So you say that the SIF is for the first 6 months, but the requirement is actually a little more than that. But we don't have the time or the energy to really go and fix it out because the planners have drawn it that way. The third one is that there is a need for exploring innovative livelihood opportunities, because let's try to understand, here is a very typical case of livelihoods or households which are not accumulated at a given geographical area. They are scattered and spread around. In Terrans, which is inhospitable, with identities which are stigmatized because they were erstwhile toddy tapper. Now that's very important. And with social capital which is almost close to zero. So you cannot talk about market opportunities that they can be having and getting them integrated, forget about the marketplace, even in the social institutions. With that, we need to acknowledge the fact that there is an enmeshed relationship between what we have already iterated at the outset, between socio-cultural variables and institutional factors. So cultural recognition needs to be supplemented with outcome-oriented economic redistribution. That's all. Thank you.